After the first JoJo video, I've gotten the fever. I got the sickness. I'm down with it. And one night I was sleeping, or attempting to sleep, and I was laying in bed. And I designed a stand based on 2010's music, and I said, what if I made more? So I did, and I'm going to tell you about them. They only have the abilities in not drawing because I am not an artist, and honestly, I don't know how I draw them. So instead, you get some weird ideas I had while I was listening to music that I grew up with. The first one I had was Till the World Ends, based on the hit song Till the World Ends, which is the ability to send the user into a state of peak physical performance for 10 minutes before shortening their lifespan by 10 days. And it has a 3-day cooldown between uses. Which my line of thinking here was dance until the world ends. What the world is, you're gonna die. It's really like, it's that simple, guys. I just did it. A lot of these are just I have an idea and I've tried to contain it, which is hence the cooldown. But I also theoretically it would be very cool if someone is like, I'm just gonna die. It's like the Chainsaw Man, basically, where he uses the sword and then he shortens his life, but he gets stronger. But I didn't want to go that far because I didn't want to make it OP immediately. But I think it's a cool final boss stand name because World End, that's a final boss stand name right there. Next up, we have the inception of this whole idea, but I only wrote it second because I was listening to music and it came up second, which is Call Me Maybe, which is probably my most gimmicky and just most out there, but I kind of love it. So the ability is that the user calls a cleaning service and is given an indication of any stand users in a straight line from the user to the building. If they receive an answer on the first ring, the enemy stand user's location is pinpointed. If they get an answer on the second, it's relayed within a 100-foot area. If it's on the third, there's a notification of the presence, that someone is there. And if they get it on the fourth ring, they get within a mile. But if they get no answer, then the enemy stand user gets a voicemail that gives the user's exact location to the enemy stand. So my line of thinking here was just a gimmick, because in the music video they're cleaning the car and it's like, okay, cleaning service, phone call, and I thought, how about we do with rings? But in the last one is my trade-off, where it's if they just don't answer, which it's a business, they should answer, then it just backfires, which I think is a good counterbalance to it all. But even it's the ringing kind of scales it in a way, and I think it's a cool little gimmick and I like it a lot. But it also is incredibly niche, because if you're out in the middle of nowhere and there's a cleaning service 100 miles away, then theoretically it's pretty good. It's one that kind of depends on the situation, because I don't set a limit on the cleaning service because it's a straight line. So it's you want to send one across the world, go off, I guess. But you're probably not going to get an answer very quickly, but you send one 20 feet away, you're going to know the guy. It's it's one of those how you use it. How you use it, it's going to be more effective or less effective depending on how the whole thing goes, which I think is a good way to keep it kind of balanced. Next up, we had Summertime Sadness, which is a very straightforward one I did, which is just that it infects people with a deep sense of lethargy by just sending mosquitoes to bite them, and the length depends on the duration that the mosquito is on the person, because most times you get a mosquito, you just slap it away, you hit it, you kill it immediately, and then you're done. It's fine. But if you somehow don't notice, then it's going to be more effective. You've gotten more blood sucked, basically. It's fairly simple. I didn't really want to get too complicated with this one. I didn't really know how to make it more complicated than that. And you definitely could, but I didn't. Next up, we have Get Lucky, which is a kind of cool one. I like this one, which is that when the user is surrounded by a crowd of 10 or more people, the user instigates a roulette, which grants one of the members of the crowd a stand ability. And then it manifests based on the person chosen, since there's the whole everyone has their own stand, which means you get an entirely random and new one every time. But the trade off is also you can't make any more during those 10 minutes, as well as like 5 hours after the usage. But then it also awakens the stand for that person who got it manifested, or at least gives them an easier chance to know they're using it. So it's one that's kind of, it's like the arrow, but more gimmicky, because it's like the guy just stands around there and goes, now all of a sudden someone's stand is manifested, which could be good for them, could be bad for them. It could just be a thing that exists because they can't control it. It's just kind of there. Next, we had a classic from Mr. Worldwide himself, Fireball, which is probably my most broken one, but also, what else are you going to do with one called Fireball? There's not a whole lot there to work with. So what I did was, the more the user becomes intoxicated, the more power they get. And it scales their blood alcohol content. And once they get to the point where they won't remember the next day, they enter a fiery state and just cause senseless damage to the world around them. Until, or if, they pass out, then in which case it's basically just a small nuke. But the user survives, but they cannot control their body for the next 72 hours. They are just stuck there being a body, so you can just shoot them dead if you're somehow outside of this 5 mile radius I've determined. However, because some people in this world are blessed that they don't get hangovers, we have a 1 in 10 million chance that the user recovers the next day with no side effects and just can do it again. Which is just, I was like, why not? This sounds gimmicky. That sounds a little fun, a little quirky. Let's do it. I think it's a good, just a little gimmick where it's a little side, little quirk that some people don't get hangovers. They drink and drink and drink. They pass out. They wake up the next day. Nothing happened. They're fine. And I just think that's a cool idea to have, where it's just, you could just cause a little nuke, but then all of a sudden, you're just fine. But this one is very kind of broken, but also in like you can't control it. It's just like a massive destruction, basically. Next up, we had to have one for the most listened to song ever, Shape of You, which I did as the user sings a song and all within earshot flock towards the user without any control over their own actions. And you can boost it with speakers or whatever else to boost the sound that comes out, and then it expands that area. However, the user must sing a famous song its entirety without making a mistake for the full effect of it all. Every mistake, a quarter of the people are released, and then it stacks with each mistake. So if you mess up 4 times, then you have lost all of them. The length doesn't matter, but you must sing it. So if you wanted to sing Bohemian Rhapsody, you could do so and get people for 8 minutes, where they just flock towards you and swarm you and basically create a human shield. But then once the song ends, everyone goes back to their starting positions and no idea that any of this happened. However, I did add a little caveat that you can't repeat the song within a 30-day period, because otherwise you'd just be spamming Bohemian Rhapsody, which is a fair enough trade-off, but I didn't want it to just be Bohemian Rhapsody. I want some vocal spice for some other of the long songs out there in the world, like Albuquerque. Someone could do Albuquerque and get 11 minutes, basically. And I thought that was a cool enough, somewhat balanced. I mean, it isn't super, strong. It's just you get a crowd of people around you. But it's something. Next up, we another classic song, Only Girl, which once the user touches a man, that man becomes just wholly devoted to the user. They'll follow any order, including sacrificing their life. And Their skill depends on the person. You get a big buff man, he's going to be stronger than a skinny white guy. But they will only target women. They are the only. This user is the only woman, only girl in the world. However, the user can also target a specific one by having the user indicate who it is as they touch the man to control them. However, the control stops if the controlled man hurts another man in any way, shape, or form. It's not about the men, it's about the women. Once the control ends, the man will have no memory of it and will be unable to be controlled ever again. Get a one time only. Get your big buff guys out first. Next up, we have Centuries, which requires the user to have a history book from a specific region and era of history. So say like Ancient Rome, Civil War America, the Great Depression, if you wanted that, I guess. And the user is granted the physical abilities of the most notable person of that time for the corresponding number of seconds as the number of pages in the book. The user is never told the person or the extent of their power, but they are consistent within the book. So if you have a 600-page book about Genghis Khan, you'll get his abilities for 600 seconds. However, you also have to open the book to the first page for the ability to activate. You can't just open it up halfway and expect to get 600 seconds. So my line of thinking this one was centuries, history, like historical eras kind of thing. It's individual person, so it's not necessarily going to be like the most notorious, but it could be. My line of thinking was I was trying to avoid the you get Hitler power, but I also don't think he was like super strong, but he is probably the most notable person for an era of history. So I wanted to. That's hence why there's the you're not told the person, so it's not like you have gained Hitler power, which is not a thing that should be uttered, even though I just did, but it is in the context of I didn't want to do this because I think that's bad. Really, though, I would think you would just go for like a Greek god. Like go for like the Odyssey, the Iliad, like one of those big, long Greek mythology books where the guys are just like beefed out with superpowers. I don't think you're going to go to like the World War II or something. Even like Genghis Khan, I feel like would be better. You get a good like early history, are probably better than anything from the 1900s onward. Next up, we have the Party Rock Anthem. Because how could you not with 2010's music? You can't not have Party Rock Anthem. Which I had as the ability was the user must be holding a boombox on their shoulder with the music turned on. As long as the music is playing, any stand user without killing intent for the user with the boombox in a 10-foot radius will have their physical abilities buffed alongside the beat of the music. Except for at a bass drop, where the buff stand user gets just a massive buff for 30 seconds because it's a bass drop, it's hype. And then once the music stops, everything goes back to normal. My line of thinking here was the killing intent was just to make sure that like it's not giving the enemy a buff, I guess, was mainly my thinking. But also like you could hurt someone without killing intent. So I think it's kind of meh. But also the length of the music, because I don't have vocal, it's just music. So you can get like 20-minute songs. You can, I guess theoretically, you could just put on like an 8-hour rain sounds playlist and be fine. I did not think of that, but now I did, and I think that's really funny, so I'm gonna let it slide. The last stand I made was something just like this, where the user copies the enemy stand, user's stand, except for one key feature of it. And this missing feature is random, and if the user tries to activate that part of the ability, the copy stand is immediately ended, disabled, and you can never copy that stand again. So it's incredibly gimmicky, where like you could still get an OP stand, but it's missing that one key thing that fits the one key thing you want, and you don't get it, then you just lose. And I think that to me is the balance, but it's still kind of there. That's all the ones I made. There were plenty more I could make, like Uptown Funk, or really Uptown Funk was the one which I was not avoiding, but I just didn't want to make one for that. I picked songs I enjoyed listening to while trying to think of the idea, and I like Uptown Funk, but I like it in a very specific context, and that context is not trying to think of a stand for it. And I imagine someone else has already done that, but these are mine. I made these. My favorite, Call Me Maybe, because that was the one that kept me awake at night for about 20 minutes as I was like, I figured it out. I've cracked the code in this cool stand. And I don't think we'll ever get to see a Rocky do the 2010s, because I think sounds like he's in the 90s for Part 9, which makes sense. Part 9 makes sense. But I hope he does some. Mainly just because I want to see a Gangnam Style stand, because I think that'd be really funny.